Would America be better under communism? So in my last year of doing this project, I have learned a lot about socialism, and I've liked a lot of what I've heard. Communism, on the other hand, is like this, I don't know, looming beast off to the side that I will eventually need to tackle. So let's start here. First off, let's define what we mean by communism. In its most broad terms, I believe communism refers to an attempt to create a classless, stateless, moneyless society that has moved beyond capitalism. Philosophically, there's a lot in there that I like in broad terms. Most of the stuff that's associated with socialism. It's the execution of a lot of these self-proclaimed communist countries that I take many issues with, especially when you get to like the New Testament of communism, Leninism. So from what I understand, Lenin came in and took Marx and Engels' work and added onto it, for better or for worse. From what I understand, his contributions are where some of the more arguably authoritarian elements of communism come into play, or I guess modern communism. Marxist-Leninists argue that in broad terms, that the best or only way to achieve socialism and ultimately communism is through a ostensibly prophesied revolution, after which the citizenry are meant to cede all of their individual civil liberties to a communist party who will hopefully act in good faith and enact this vision of a classless, stateless, moneyless utopia. There's a lot in there that I take issue with, but I will say, again, I have not studied any of these concepts in any sort of detail whatsoever, so in the words of the great Sean Carroll, right now I have personal opinions on these topics, not convictions, so please don't take what I'm saying in that way. So anyway, to answer this question, would America be better under communism? I don't know how to answer this. Again, I am not a communist, and again, not a conviction, but the vision of Marxism, Leninism, where civil liberties are severely restricted, I generally think that's not a good thing. I also think that what we currently define as liberal democracy, where people are able to, elect representatives or vote for policy themselves, I think that is generally a good thing, or at least overall better than ceding all of your rights to make those sorts of decisions to a completely unaccountable force that they call a communist party. Now, if we took some of these ideas of communism, or more broadly socialism, workers not being exploited, people's basic needs are met, people have more free time, and we stop exploiting workers around the world, yeah, I think things would be better all around in that context. But would America be better under a Marxist, Leninist regime that we see in places like China or the USSR? In some ways, maybe. In other ways, no. Now, maybe with the kind of more philosophical stuff that communists tend to preach, we'd stop exploiting people around the world as much, so maybe the world would be a better place for everyone else. Again, I don't know. I do personally think that we can have high living standards like we see in the American middle class, even without exploiting people around the world, and we can actually extend the positives of our lifestyle to the rest of the world whom we are currently exploiting. Anyway, I feel like I'm blabbering. Let's just watch the video. Would America be better under communism?
You cannot
Hannah,
say
Hannah, I don't want to argue.
You do want to argue. You wanted to make your point, so let me make it back.
Hannah,
And then you're going to try to say it's too spicy for me. No, I got you. Let me respond to you. It is not capitalism coming in and enshrining enslavement. And in fact, capitalism is what got rid of it and started pushing back against this centuries-old awful institution. So to say it's capitalism, I think is honestly offensive.
We are approaching the 150th episode of
Holy shit. Did that say Hassan Piker versus Ben Shapiro? That will never happen. Hassan has said he would debate Ben Shapiro multiple times.
America would be a more powerful country under communism.
That's kind of what the title is talking about here, right? And I think communists, depending on how you want to interpret this question, I think most communists would say no. In the sense that we're talking about like global hegemonic power, right? Communism and just leftist thought in general tends to be averse to conglomerating power to a tiny minority. Philosophically, it's about it's the idea that spreading that power out is ultimately better for the vast majority of people. But like a communist future, a leftist future in general, powerful countries don't really have a place in that vision. This isn't really what leftist thought is about. I still would assume we're going to see these guys move forward in the sense that they're going to just basically kind of do what we said in the title, like would America would probably be a better place with these kind of leftist ideas. I don't know. That's another thing I was going to say. I don't know how much of this is going to be really about communism. You know what I mean? Like actual what communism is. I imagine a lot of this is going to be just broad leftist or broad socialist thought that's going to be discussed. So I don't recognize any of these people off the top. Let's take a quick look at who these people are. Oh, one of these guys is Midwestern Marx. I have heard of this guy. I've never watched any of his videos before, but like he's one of the bigger, you know, communist content creators. So I have seen his name kind of floated around, but I don't know anything about him. Hannah Cox. Guessing she's one of the capitalists. Is capitalism dying? I fucking hope so. Looks like just like general anti-woke, kind of just modern conservative bullshit. Hey Malombo, he, him, king. I'm guessing he's one of the communists. I don't know anything about him. Ty Lopez. Oh my god, he's the Here in My Garage guy. This was 8 years ago? Holy shit, dude, I am old. Okay, so they got this guy. Toxic Bunny. Okay, she's some sort of content creator. 100K followers on Insta. Oh, I guess she's a Twitch streamer? Okay, that's who we're dealing with. Okay.
I think it would be a lot better for all the people who are working jobs that are not, I guess, tech, basically. So I make content, which means that I work a lot of hours and I don't get paid the same amount as a soft dev. So I think it would create more creativity in certain like creative industries, artists. If you make a bigger pie, everyone gets a bigger slice.
Yeah. I think one of the main misconceptions about communism is that
I'm going to be honest. I don't fully know what she was trying to say there.
it's just making everybody equally poor. When Marx and Engels wrote repeatedly that the first step under communism is increasing the productive forces. In the US, over 80% of our population is living paycheck to paycheck. If you provide people's basic needs, if you invest in economic growth and in jobs and in infrastructure rather than investing in endless war and massacring Muslim people in Gaza.
I get the point bro's trying to make, but I thought he was going to be like, instead of just giving all of those funds to the wealthy, instead of siphoning all of the like fruits of our production to a tiny minority. What he's describing is a part of it, but I feel like he was trying to make some sort of, you know, topical political statement that didn't undermine his point, but I think he could have made a better point, but I don't know.
You're going to make this country a lot stronger. You're going to make the people a lot more stable here.
I grew up in a white ring area.
Yeah, I fully agree with what he said there. I think that investing in public infrastructure, investing in public education, all of the things he said are 100% ROI positive for society. That is how you make society a better place, not by siphoning all of our money to the top. Invest in public infrastructure. And for me, it's not like just, I don't know, an opinion that I have, or just a feeling, or just a desire for charity broadly. It has just been proven time and time again. Social programs, social safety nets, these are all really powerful ways to make your society better. Pretty much every society that does these things sees improvements. It's like every other first world country and countless not first world countries have universal healthcare. What, are they all just fucking stupid? And it's like you can point to the exact reasons why we don't have universal healthcare today. The healthcare lobby. You can see how our politicians are being paid. In 2023, the healthcare industry spent $740 million on lobbying. What do you think these motherfuckers are lobbying for? You think any of this money is spent trying to convince the politicians this money is going to give universal healthcare? It's more profitable for these countries to spend $750 million lining the pockets of our politicians than for us to have a public healthcare system. For them, it's a mutually beneficial scenario. The politicians get fuck tons of money. This is barely anything to the healthcare industry. So they pay them to not support universal healthcare, and then the industry can keep making a profit. The only people being screwed here are you and me. If you think that the healthcare industry is doing this out of the kindness of their hearts, I have a bridge to sell you. Anyway.
I grew up in Denver, Colorado. I was born in Dallas, Texas. I'm the first American in my family. Everybody's from the Congo. If my family was able to come here, of course, it would have some capitalist connection. So I grew up very much with the idea that everything I need is under capitalism. Individualism, freedom, all these things are under capitalism. But I'm black in America. So those contradictions really just create that friction where I'm like, this doesn't align with what I was told and what I'm actually seeing or actually feeling. So why did I come to communism? When I actually read it, when I went from Marx to Lenin to Mao to Deng to Fred Hampton, I started realizing like, oh, this is patriotism.
That's some names.
This is the idea that I look at another American and think to myself, I want you to be fed. I want you to feel fulfilled in your life. I want you to feel like you actually have control within your society. Honestly, as somebody, again, who grew up in that right-wing area, that flies over everybody's heads.
Yeah.
Disagreeers are walking quick on this one. Can I say something first? First on
Okay,
this one
bro.
to be so bold. Here's my argument. How come every communistic country has to build a wall or a fence to keep people in? China ain't letting people out. My grandma, I remember going, my grandma. Yeah, but where did you come?
Yeah, hold on. Is bro saying that, like, immigration doesn't happen from communist countries? The Chinese diaspora in the United States is comprised of approximately 5.4 million individuals who were born in China, Hong Kong, or Macau. Now, I know China has, like, 1.5 billion people, but that's still a lot of people immigrating from China to just the United States alone. So, I don't know. And honestly, I'm not trying to say that governments like China don't have, in a lot of ways, an authoritarian or totalitarian stronghold over the civil liberties of their populations. I personally think that that is not a very good thing about those countries. That's not something that I like in, these kind of modern expressions or interpretations of Marxist-Leninism. It doesn't really have anything to do with the socialism that I understand or that I like, which is about, workers' rights and just generally being better to one another and like dismantling uneven, undeserved power structures. That's what socialism is to me. Restricting your citizenry's civil liberties doesn't really connect to that. That's more of a demand that, like I said, as far as I know, that's more of a demand that in order to achieve what I want, we have to restrict those civil liberties to like get there as fast as possible or something. It's something like that, you know what I mean? So while I don't agree with a lot of the more authoritarian things that these countries do, the idea that you can't immigrate from them is not entirely correct either. But let's see.
But where did you come? There's not a mass immigration into Venezuela, into China, into Russia. Where do people want to go? Switzerland, America, Sweden. They're all talking about, we need to build a wall because...
Okay, I mean, like, people aren't immigrating into China because China has extremely stringent immigration requirements. Like, it would be not next to impossible. I think literally impossible for me to ever, under any circumstances, immigrate to China. Unless, like, maybe I married a Chinese woman or I discovered long-lost cousins, first cousins who are Chinese. Even then, it would probably be difficult. As for him mentioning, like, I don't know, what did he say? Venezuela? I don't know. The other thing I would point to is, like, okay, there are, 10 capitalist countries that a lot of people want to immigrate to? What about the other 250 capitalist countries that no one wants to immigrate to? We always point to like the US and Western Europe as perfect examples of capitalism's supremacy, but we never talk about the other, like I said, 250 currently practicing capitalist nations that are in utter destitution, or at least not nearly as powerful and wealthy. This is just a function of capitalism. I have literally never seen any sort of example of capitalism operating otherwise. Money, power, all of it will always, unregulated, will always flow to a tiny minority. That is just a function of capitalism. Capitalists, it blows my mind. They will deny that. They will be like, actually, it's when regulation comes in that this happens. And that if we were to just remove all the regulations, then all power and money wouldn't accumulate to a tiny minority. It's this absolutely bizarre completely strange fantasy world that capitalists live in. Capitalism is mostly unregulated on the world stage at this point. Pretty much the only regulations, the tiny amount that we have, are there to prevent you from paying your employees nothing, to prevent you from employing children, and to prevent you from literally putting lead in our fucking gasoline. Because to save an extra 1 penny on your quarterly report, you would do that. Speaking to the capitalist. Anyway.
Because people are coming. China's not going, well, we better build a wall because all those Americans are coming across. Nobody's going there.
So you legally
Dog, all the countries, you know, in South America, he's talking about building a wall, in like South and Central America or whatever, where people are fleeing, aside from what? Venezuela? They're all capitalist, bro. They're just on the wrong end of capitalism. The inevitable wrong end of capitalism. There is no incentive under capitalism to spread out power. By design, it will flow to the top.
cannot become Chinese. I went to international school growing up, and every single non-Asian or anyone else that's like American or Canadian that's gone to China has never wanted to come back to the US. That's something that's really interesting. So I think it's like if you've never been.
That's an adverse selection, a group of people who are
Let her
already.
finish your point, and then
Like,
we got you.
I guess like whoever has the open mind to go visit usually doesn't want to come back. And I do live streaming, so I know a lot of live streamers who like permanently move over to the like Asia, especially China, because not just it's cheaper, it's also just higher benefits. Most people get like free healthcare, so it's a lot easier for you to survive there. I think it's not because people don't want to go, it's also because you're taught propaganda since a young age. China's scary, China's bad, evil, red dragon, so people don't go and don't even go see it. That's the problem.
What? That was... I don't know. I don't think that was the best argument I've ever heard in my life. Okay, I'm not going to be charitable just because I'm more ideologically aligned with these guys than these guys. That was just a bad argument all the way through. Okay, let's try and break some of this shit down. So for one, she's doing the thing that I hate more than anything on earth. She's giving a personal anecdote, and she's using it to define her worldview. She said, I know some people who went to China and they didn't want to leave. That is not systemic analysis. That is not useful in any capacity. And the other thing she said was like, some of them stayed in China? Again, unless they were, you know, American-born Chinese content creators who had direct family out there, I don't think you can immigrate there. Again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Do a Google search first, but as far as I know, it is next to impossible to move there. So like I just straight up almost don't believe what she's saying. And like I've heard people like Hassan talk about how, you know, Hassan, you know, he's definitely, you can tell by listening to him, he has Marxist Leninist roots. Like I think he's more of a Demsoc now, like a democratic socialist now, but he definitely had Marxist Leninist roots. But he has said specifically that he doesn't think he could ever move to China, specifically because of his work, like criticizing government. Like you just can't do that out there. And Hassan admits that you can't do that out there, which I think is a good thing, ultimately, that you should be able to do in good faith. But overall, I just don't like Homegirl's argument here. It just, none of it added up to me.
I would definitely argue that a lot of China's success is due to the introduction of free markets, but if we want to run with this idea that China's a socialist country, which is just fundamentally untrue, I could also just point to the fact that they're super low on the HDI. Their GDP per capita is like $12,000. The US GDP per capita is $70,000. So like
we'll get into what he's saying, but there's like this fucking like smug little bitch ass energy coming off of this guy that I already just fucking hate. Like I don't hate nerds, I'm a fucking nerd, but like this type of shit is like, ugh, it just fucking nails on a chalkboard to me. They're lower on the HDI. You want to talk about the HDI? List of countries by Human Development Index. All the way down here is the United States, the richest country ever. We are 21st. The most capitalist country, the richest country, the best country. How are we way the fuck down here? And then look at everyone above us. Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, Hong Kong, Australia, Denmark, Sweden, Ireland, Germany, the Netherlands, Finland, Singapore, Belgium, New Zealand, Canada, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, the United Kingdom, Japan, and South Korea. Overwhelmingly robust social democratic structure. Yes, they are technically capitalist. All of these countries are in fact taking advantage of the global south from a capitalist, perspective, or I guess from a leftist perspective. But they don't have nearly the wealth that the United States controls. The through line that I see is a robust social welfare safety net in all of these countries, even like Singapore, which is often pointed to as like an Ayn Randian fucking wet dream. Even Singapore, in a lot of ways, has a robust social safety net. Better than ours, as far as I know. Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, they also have robust social safety nets, more robust than the United States. So yeah, I don't know if the HDI is necessarily the best metric of success from his perspective that he should be pointing to. But anyway.
I would say in terms of like economic success, we're definitely doing way better.
Ty, in terms of how we see immigration into this country.
Doing way better than China?
Of course, we're American. We're only going to see the American viewpoints of this. China has immigration. People do try to cross to China's border all the time. We're all humans. Everybody's doing the same thing around the world. I would say what you're saying.
Again, unless I am just completely missing some key piece of information, China does not really have immigration. At least not nearly the kind we see in the United States. I think bro is just straight up wrong. I think he just wants to defend a country that is seemingly on his side. I'm just going to keep it real. But clear the air in the comments if I'm wrong.
Is a perspective issue. I would love to break it down even more and talk to you about the massive amounts of CIA missions that have gone through Latin America to destabilize those countries, but just at that point. To what you were saying, judging a country by how much the wealthiest people in their country profit in their company, we both know what GDP means.
Of course.
It's a bad faith way to really explain
what
your
about
country.
HDI? Human Development Index.
And how's
so
that
it's
made?
measured by things like health, income. It's the UN standard for like how well an economy is doing.
So from that point, perfect. Healthcare.
I don't know if it's the UN standard for how well an economy is doing, but I see his point.
We rank 37 in the United States. Cuba ranks 2-1.
Oh God.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Wait.
Hold on.
Cuba
We gotta
ranks
take a
what?
step back.
Cuba ranks what? Wait, I really want to engage.
They've been
with this.
number 1 and number 2 and hover through those spots.
According to Cuba.
Cuba uses their
according to the
doctors.
Commonwealth Fund.
According to Cuba? Yeah, I mean, I don't know too much about the subject, but doesn't Cuba aren't they known for having a solid healthcare system? You'll hear people say like most doctors per capita. I think they have a lung cancer vaccine. Just a lot of medical research is done out there. She's like, according to Cuba.
According to the Commonwealth Fund and the
Wait. Cuba is 83 on the HTI. They use their doctors like slaves.
I don't know. Like, is it one thing to be informed? Is it another thing to know exactly where Cuba sits on the HDI? You know what I mean? Like, there has to be a line somewhere, right? Anyways.
Because 90% of the profit goes to the state.
They literally traffic their doctors. When
doctors
George W.
get very
Bush
little.
opened up a program to let Cuban doctors
As opposed to what? 90% of the profit going to a tiny minority of individuals through capitalism? Fine, I'll concede it. Sure, it goes to the state and then it goes directly into the Castro family's pocket. Fuck it. Let's pretend that's true. I don't think that's a good thing either. That is another problem I have with these kind of Marxist, Leninist, socialist regimes or countries. Let's say that was happening in Cuba, what he just said. Let's pretend that was true. The citizenry would have absolutely no way to fight back. They cannot vote these regimes out of power. There's very little public oversight, and there's a lot of propaganda that the countries give to their citizenry. And again, don't take that as me saying we don't do that in the West. Sure we do. I'm just saying both are bad, whether it's happening under capitalism, whether it's happening under so-called Marxist-Leninism. I don't care. I want government to always be highly accountable by the public. I don't believe in unaccountable entities, whether it's an unaccountable capitalist entity or it's an unaccountable communist entity in the form of a Marxist-Leninist party. I believe in public accountability. I think that is a lot of what socialism preaches. And then I see these Marxist-Leninist countries not doing that. And it's confusing to me. So again, I don't know if what he's saying is true, but even if it was, not a good thing.
Escape because they were trafficking them and making them go do these PR campaigns in other countries to give health care. 7,000 people immediately came to the U.S. At one meeting, 2 doctors passed notes to other doctors they were on a hospital set with and said, kidnapped. This is propaganda.
So I appreciate the emotional examples, 100%.
It's not emotional. You can.
Okay, well, one, she's not, I mean, because she's not really giving an emotional example, but whether what she said is true or not, yeah, I don't know if individual examples like that are entirely useful. I don't know if any of that is true. Let's assume it is. Fine. Government shouldn't do that. But fine. Great. Communism forces you to do shit. Great. Let's just pretend that that's true. Fuck it. Capitalism does it too, in very similar ways. The same shit she is critiquing, capitalism does the exact same shit, usually worse. So again, I'm just a radical centrist. I say both are bad. Whether it happens under capitalism or under the auspices of a communist party, governments doing unaccountable shit and capitalist entities doing unaccountable shit, both are bad. I highly believe in public accountability. Not to say that doesn't present its own challenges. It 100% does. But I think it ultimately shakes out to being better for the citizens. Anyway.
How far back do you think the embargo is affecting Cuba?
How long back do I think the embargo, probably since it's been put on.
Oh, really?
But I think when we look at...
No, let me respond real quick.
God, what a fucking little bitch debate lord. He's like, he got the exact thing he wanted from him, and he's like, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. You need to shut the fuck up and let me say my shit in response to what you just, I don't know, kind of vaguely hand-waved. So now I'm gonna say shit as though that's your exact 100% well-informed worldview. We've watched a lot of, like, shitty conservatives on Jubilee, but this guy might be legitimately the most fucking annoying so far.
In 1960, the USSR became the largest trading partner with Cuba. They started paying more for Cuba's
sugar. Yeah.
They started buying all of Cuba's sugars and paying more than the United States was paying. Fidel Castro is on record saying that the embargo had no effect on Cuba at all. So we can presume that up until 1991, when the USSR collapsed, that it didn't have an effect.
Yeah. So we need, like, this video would be better if after every statement, they took 15 minutes to fact check. Now, that would be the most boring video ever, and they're not going to pay these guys enough to do that. But both sides. I want to hear fact checks from both sides.
The claim that the embargo is affecting Cuba.
And I think when we look at can I make a point? Because this is a point I wanted to make for a long time. When we look at countries like Cuba and China, I think it's more important to judge them based on what they had before the revolution. Before Cuba had a revolution, nobody had access to health care. They were working on slave plantations that were dominated by Western multinational corporations. China before the revolution, yes, there were famines during the era of Mao. There were far more famines before Mao came to power and before China was able to industrialize and get to the point today.
Yeah, this is a common talking point from communists, socialists, leftists in general today. You know, capitalists will be like, all of these communist nations are so awful, blah, 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 blah. They will retort with, well, look at what they were like before, you know, they attempted communism. Leftist principles in general make sense to me. It's the apparatus by which these Marxist-Leninist countries attempt to, you know, create that leftist future that I just don't see eye to eye with.
Where they're now one of the most powerful countries on earth. In the 1950s, the U.S. was already industrialized. China had to do that. They were a semi-feudal country in extreme poverty. And in just 70 plus years, they've become this economic superpower. That is through central economic planning and, yes, allowing some of those private markets in.
That's by undercutting the U.S. on labor because they don't actually have to pay people very much. They don't have to pay them based on their values, so they can make people come over there and work far cheaper, have their companies there, and then we buy their products cheaper. We are propping up China's economy, and we've been really stupid with our own policies when it comes to that. And also, we are constantly hamstringing ourselves because our government keeps regulating our economy more, getting more involved, tying its hands, so that they are outpacing us, plus all the money we're spending on war, instead of actually like letting people keep their taxes and invest in more things. So they are playing us right now. The U.S. has been really foolish, but it's not because communism works. They were starving up until 1929.
Well, let's look at exactly what they did. Let's look at exactly what they did when they opened up trade. They opened up special economic zones where multinational corporations could come in. but they said you're only allowed to do things as long as it's in line with the party and as long as it's in line
Wow.
with the government's central plans. I mean, to say that China is just capitalist, full stop, or that all their
I'm not
successes
saying that
come
they are
from
capitalist.
capitalism
I'm saying that they
is
were
pretty
starving
ridiculous.
before
I don't think
capitalism
anyone
started
said
They
getting
were
the foot
starving
in the
under
door.
feudalism.
Hannah and Cam come in here with the guns. They got the fire. They know it. They're ready for this. Who is we? When
That
you
was
say
silly.
We, who's in this we? Because
That
we
was silly.
did this. Because we did that. Who is this? Who is this
So again,
metaphorical we?
because the U.S. government is not a capitalist government, and we have to be strict about terms here. Capitalism is a system and an economy. The government can either uphold capitalism or they can impede it. Our government is constantly impeding it. So when the government comes in and tells you, you can trade with this person, you can't trade with that person, that is the government, which is we, because we have a representative government doing that. Is that something I, as a capitalist, want to see them doing?
An American citizen.
No,
We
I
are
don't.
American
But we
citizens,
are
is
American
what you're
citizens,
saying.
and so they are supposed to be representing our interests. If we're going to talk about what we're
Dude, I don't know, man. If you're trying to argue to me that the United States is fucking too strict on capitalism, you will always lose me, dude. That is a fucking wild statement to make. The idea that we have too many regulations on capitalism. Again, to just point to the HDI thing, the overwhelming majority of the countries above us have significantly more regulations on capitalism. They don't let their companies fuck over their workers nearly as much as we do. It is much harder to fuck over the citizens of most of these countries than it is in the US. Look at this one. Inequality adjusted HDI. We dropped to the 25th ranking. We're being lapped by Cyprus and Estonia and Malta. I don't know. I'm seeing a pattern here, and the pattern isn't more unregulated free markets in terms of correlating, better livelihoods for your citizenry. The further down you go, you start to see other correlations, and one of those being fewer regulations on capitalism. Now, the other thing you start to notice when you start to get really down here is exploitation by the people up here. But there is definitely also a correlation of regulating capitalism, establishing a strong social safety net. Anyway.
we're doing as a country, yes, like that is a huge part of it. And I also want to go back to communism, because when you talk about some of these countries that people often call democratic socialist countries, they rank higher on the Economic Freedom Index.
Okay. Red flag. That you have no clue what the fuck you're talking about. These countries are not democratic socialist. I want to make that clear. These are not socialist countries. These are all capitalist countries, for sure. But they have social policies. In a lot of ways, philosophically socialist policies. Strong worker rights, strong welfare programs, etc. But they are not democratic socialist. They are social democracies. But that is a big distinction. That does matter. That if it's like 2024 and you're still mixing that up and you're like a political commentator, like I'm not trying to act like I'm the most informed, but like you got to know the difference between sock dems and dem socks. I mean, come on.
Than we do. That means they are more capitalist in their economy.
And I don't think those
than
countries
we
are socialist, to be
and
clear.
so I just want to make sure we're defining terms, because communism.
I literally almost did a spit take. Okay, I must have misheard. We got to rewind.
When you talk about some of these countries that people often call democratic socialist countries, they rank higher on the Economic Freedom Index than we do. That means they are more capitalist in their economy.
And I don't think those
than
countries
we
are socialist, to be
and
clear.
so I just want to make sure we're defining terms, because communism.
So Midwestern Marx said what I said, that those countries are not socialist, and that is true. But what is she talking about? The Index of Economic Freedom. The Index of Economic Freedom is an annual index and ranking created by the Heritage Foundation? Yeah, I don't know. Isn't it a fallacy to like not trust the source or whatever? I don't know. I'm going to be immediately highly skeptical of anything the fucking Heritage Foundation is putting out. An activist American conservative think tank. This is pretty much where every bad conservative, neoliberal, capitalist idea has originated from in the last 40, 50 years. It took a leading role in the conservative movement in the 1980s during the precedent of Ronald Reagan, whose policies were taken from Heritage Foundation studies. Wouldn't you fucking know? Dude, yeah, bro, I don't know. John Miller roundly criticized the index, writing in dollars and cents. In the hands of the Wall Street Journal and the Heritage Foundation, Washington's foremost right-wing think tank, however, an economic freedom index merely measures corporate and entrepreneurial freedom from accountability. Yeah, okay, so if that's what they're looking for, freedom from accountability, then this index is fucking meaningless. Upon examination, the index turns out to be a poor barometer of either freedom, more broadly construed, or of prosperity. According to Left Business Observer, growth in index accounts for 10% of the variation in the growth of GDP. Yeah, bro, this index is fucking meaningless. Anyway.
Is the centralized control and ownership of production of companies.
Sorry,
but this is my point I'm trying to make. Like, we
feel
have to
I-
talk about actual
It just
systems
feels
that are
antithetical
communist if
for
we're going
the
to debate
capitalist side
this.
to define socialism to me. It feels as very demeaning.
Wait, are we doing
How do you
communism or
How do you
socialism?
define it then? Because I'm hearing things called socialism that
Labor-
aren't.
But the prompt is communism.
I guess, like, in terms of communism and capitalism,
What are we talking about here,
both
bro?
are ideal states that don't fully work by themselves. But I do think capitalism is more pessimistic versus communism more optimistic. In an ideal state, if everyone actually worked hard and they wanted to contribute to a society to make it better, I think communism would work.
Everybody cares. I think you guys
I don't know, that was too vibes-based for me. She hasn't said a whole lot that I've been impressed with so far.
are well-intentioned
Well,
people.
you could teach them though.
Giving
What?
people government aid makes them lazy.
Jesus Christ, I fucking hate this myth. It makes my fucking blood boil. Yo, let's go. 76% said no? That is pretty crazy from the Jubilee audience. But that makes me a little bit hopeful. Yeah, I mean, it has just been proven time and time again, the power of social welfare benefits, social safety nets. These are always positive contributions to your society. It will not make them lazy. You know what it does do? It removes insecurity. It gives a lot more people opportunities to get better jobs, to get a better education, to allow for social mobility. This is a myth supported by the rich who pay our politicians to also propagate this idea, to not create policies that would ultimately tax the rich to create those social safety nets so they could pocket more of their money. But no, the country would be a better place if everyone had access to healthcare, if everyone had access to an education and shelter and the other basic necessities people need. That would be better for society than letting the rich hoard that money. We could have all of those things and the rich could stay rich. That's what's frustrating to me. It's not like I'm asking every rich person to give away all of their money and go live in the fucking woods. They will stay rich under these social democratic policies. Again, we have not even reached socialism. Under a social democratic framework, we could achieve these things and society would be significantly better than it currently is. Again, just look at that stupid ass HDI. So yeah, this is fucking bullshit. Okay.
Getting government aid
Wait,
makes you
what?
lazy. A great example
Wait,
of that
what?
is Elon Musk. The amount of government aid the X Foundation gets in order to pursue inventions that don't work. How often did you hear about that tunnel? Elon Musk is just one example of many different CEOs, multi-corporations, who get government aid to be able to do these things just because they have the net worth.
Yeah.
I mean, like, Elon Musk sucks. Like, he's a gigantic piece of shit for a lot of reasons. But government subsidies aren't necessarily a bad thing. Broadly speaking, I like subsidies. The problem with Elon Musk is the hypocrisy. The problem with Elon Musk isn't that he takes money from the government. The government is wise to invest in these sorts of things, frankly. Now, obviously, not everything the government invests in is going to work. The capitalists will always attempt to exploit what the government gives you for profit. It just is what it is. It's the positing that he's this self-made titan of industry when much of his success was provided by public investment.
I agree with you on this. I hate corporate welfare. I think it's
Yeah, exactly. The reactionary over here is agreeing with him. I kind of get what Malombo is talking about here. You know, like, again, like, the vibes I kind of get, but I don't think this argument is hitting, honestly. I'm not, like, super impressed by the communist so far. He's been okay, but he's, like, clearly a pro. The other two I have not been impressed with. Obviously, these guys all fucking suck, but I was hoping for better from these guys. Anyway.
It's the biggest perversion of capitalism out there. It doesn't work. Its track record is terrible. And it actually is the government coming in and picking winners and losers. And it very rarely goes in favor of small businesses, which is what most business in the US actually is owned by. But the way it makes people lazy is not necessarily because they're bad people. It's because you have fiscal cliffs. You get this amount of welfare if you make under $24,000 a year. You make
Benefits cliffs, the cliff effect, refer to the sudden and often unexpected decrease in public benefits that can occur with a small increase in earnings, right? So, for example, I'm just gonna make up an example. You're earning $49K a year, which means that you, in your state, you get access to free healthcare, let's say. And having that free healthcare saves you, like, I don't know, $20,000 a year on your medical bills. Like, you have some crazy thing that costs $20,000 a year. I don't know. Now, let's say you get a raise to $50,000. Well, your state's cutoff was $50,000, let's say. Now, all of a sudden, you don't get access to your state's subsidized healthcare. Now, you're earning $50,000, but you have to pay that $20,000 out of pocket, so you're really earning $30,000, basically. Again, that was just a completely fake, nonsensical example, but that is roughly what can happen as described by the benefits cliff concept.
$25,000 a year, your benefits drop off. So it actually disincentivizes people from moving up, working harder, taking on more jobs. And it's a terrible structure.
I really, really don't see that as a problem with social welfare. Maybe that's a problem with, like, means testing. Fine, then just make those basic necessities free for everyone. Then that won't be a problem. You get healthcare no matter what you're earning.
We agree with that from a perspective of it creates animosity. If there was a system saying that you couldn't use a certain government aid program that you're already paying taxes to just because you make this amount, wouldn't you have animosity for those people below you?
The cliffs are, I think, more so specifically referencing like situations where people are taking in welfare and it compensates for their like lack of income, and then they get a promotion or something and they lose the welfare and they're worse off than they were before they lost the welfare and prior to the promotion. You build that state dependency and it de-incentivizes people to like work up the corporate ladder in their companies because they're receiving aid from the government.
I think also we have to say what makes people work hard, not just what makes people lazy. Because I think that's the problem. You look at government welfare, it is essentially keeping people trapped. It keeps them trapped in cycles of poverty. We actually saw before the great welfare.
Oh my fucking god, just myths upon myths that she's just pulling out of her ass, that there is no fucking legitimate, like, study that points to these things. Pretty much every time a social welfare policy or a social safety net is implemented, more people escape poverty. Period.
Fair deal under LBJ was pushed through, we had a larger rate of people coming out of poverty and moving up in this country. And then when we implemented these programs, that has stagnated ever since. And we can see that that hasn't worked.
Just help me out here real quick.
Wait,
so
what?
When you say it doesn't,
She's arguing that LBJ's Great Society programs, which were a series of various social welfare programs that we implemented in the mid-60s, are the reason that social mobility in the US has stagnated? You know what else happened since LBJ's Great Society programs? Increased wealth inequality. Increased income inequality. The wealth of our nation has become more concentrated. Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, these Great Society programs, aren't policies that you can just quit your job and mooch off of. Look, you can't deny that the majority of wealth has been siphoned to the top. That's where your social mobility went, not fucking Medicare. Honestly, this is not the first time I've heard this argument from a capitalist. I guess it's just in their dialogue tree. But upon any amount of examination, the argument makes no fucking sense. All in all, the Great Society programs, by almost every conceivable metric, were positive. And trying to draw a line, like, from them to the lack of social mobility in American society today has to be among the top 10 dumbest right-wing myths circulating today. From 1963, when LBJ took office, until 1970, as the impact of his Great Society programs were felt, the portion of Americans living below the poverty line dropped from 22.2% to 12.6%, the most dramatic decline over such a brief period in this century. The percentage of African Americans below the poverty line dropped from 55% in 1960 to 27% in 1968. From 1964 to 1967, federal expenditures on education rose from $4 billion to $12 billion. Wow, it's almost like there's a direct correlation from social welfare spending to eliminating poverty. What a fucking unbelievable revelation that I just discovered for the first time. The World Bank has estimated that social safety nets have helped around 36% of the poorest in the world escape extreme poverty. Here, the social safety nets have helped reducing the absolute poverty gap with 45%, whereas the relative poverty gap is reduced by 16%. Despite these numbers, the World Bank claim that the real numbers are probably even higher. Yeah, all in all, this person is a fucking idiot for trying to be like, the Great Society program. Again, I think it was Amala who made this fucking argument that the Great Society programs are some massive contributor to, eliminating social mobility in the US, and not the coinciding, complete and utter drastic movement of the country's wealth to the top. Now, since the Great Society programs, what we haven't done is expand public policy, is expand our social safety net in the US. Not by much. What we have done is neoliberalism, which, contrary to what some fucking idiots will tell you, blew up since those policies. We have done a lot more neoliberalism and capitalism than we have done social welfare in the United States. So if we're going to correlate anything to the destruction of social mobility in the United States, I would not point to LBJ's great, like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. That's where the American social mobility ladder went. No, it's the policy of giving all of our wealth to the rich and just, hoping they'll let it trickle down, but they have no incentive for it to trickle down. And it obviously, in practice, never fucking will.
What didn't work?
We have not seen a decrease in the rate of people who are in poverty. And part of this is based on the education system. Part of this is based on different...
Since LBJ's Great Society programs? That is just factually incorrect. I just showed you. Once again, the portion of Americans living below poverty dropped from 22.2% to 12.6% between 1963 and 1970. And this is, again, before the hyper neoliberalism that we're feeling today really started to get enacted. And that number has stayed roughly the same since the last time we really did some real social spending, which was the Great Society programs. The official poverty rate in 2022 for the US was 11.5%, with 38 million Americans in poverty. Richest country ever, by the way. We almost had some stuff with Build Back Better under the Joe Brandon presidency. That obviously didn't go anywhere because of, obviously, it would undermine some of the profits of the neoliberal entities who control our politicians. But yeah, I do think, it's not just, for me, it's not just charity, okay? I do think we should help the 40 million Americans living under poverty just because it's a nice thing to do. It's the right thing to do. I do believe that. Even if it wasn't, as I'm going to say now, ultimately ROI positive, because I also believe that. In terms of a net positive to society, if we were to expand our social safety nets, expand our social welfare, eliminate this level of poverty, I just think it would ultimately be better for our country than if we just give all of that money to the rich who don't need it. And the idea that they're going to do incredible things with that money, that's also just a lie. They're going to pocket as much of it as they fucking can. It's what they're incentivized to do. It's so fucking obvious to me. It's frustrating.
Because of LBJ.
Yes, these programs that came in, the welfare, I don't know this because of it. I think it's stacked.
Yeah, it's not because of it, dog. We do. Oh my fucking God. This person is so fucking stupid. Holy shit.
Stagnated work that was being done. For me, as somebody who works in public policy.
Medicare? Medicaid? Did she just say she works in public policy? and she doesn't know, like, anything about the Great Society programs. Social Security has no fucking effect on social mobility, Medicare, Medicaid, no. All they've done, like every other social safety net, is help eliminate poverty. Jesus Christ, dude.
See, that's what I'm interested in. What works?
What works? By every metric, in every study, social welfare spending works. Neoliberal policies of siphoning all of our money to the rich does not work. They will never let it trickle down. They will keep it all for themselves permanently. If you think anything else, you are incredibly naive.
There are cases where I think people are incentivized to work less hard in order to keep their income under a certain level so they can collect a
Yeah, so eliminate those means testing. Just make it fucking universal.
certain amount of government money, which in that specific case, then yes, I guess it does incentivize laziness. But also, if you look at government programs like Medicare and Medicaid, they're some of the most highly approved of programs in the country. And when you make a welfare program universal, when you make it so it applies to everybody,
Let's
it basically becomes politically invincible because nobody is going to argue for their grandma's health care.
Also true.
Away. And we have a
But it
problem
also eliminates those problems that come with kind of some of the stuff they're describing here.
in this country where 45,000
As many as 44, I think that's what he's about to say, 45,000 Americans of working age die each year because they lack health insurance, more than the number who die annually from kidney disease. How fucking unspeakably cruel is that? And that's not because, oh my God, there's just the money's not there. We just couldn't do it. No. This is a fucking annual genocide because the fucking rich want to be slightly more rich, bro. How sad is that, dude? We could save all of these Americans' lives and the rich would stay rich. A trillion times over. Fuck this system, dude.
thousand people are dying every single year because they don't have access to basic health insurance. And I think if we were to nip that in the bud and nationalize those giant pharmaceutical companies and make sure that healthcare is provided to everyone, we would actually stimulate a lot of innovation, a lot of labor, and a lot of hard work in this country because people would be less bogged down by medical bills and would be more healthy in general.
So without a market, if the pharmaceutical industry specifically is nationalized, how does the state set prices effectively?
How does the state set prices effectively? Well, compared to some, other leftists, I am, in some contexts in favor of market solutions, frankly. I talk a lot about market socialism. Pharmaceuticals, it's not something I've given a lot of direct thought over. Not sure how I feel about that being market-based. There's some things that I just don't believe require market solutions at all. But without a market for the pharmaceutical prices, you set prices based on the cost of production. And I guess the counter to this would be some bullshit surrounding the profit motive as an incentive toward innovation. But, a counter to this would be the pharmaceutical industry already receives a metric fuck ton of public funding and support, especially in regard to R&D, the process of coming up with new drugs. In addition, governments of other countries, of better countries, at least in favor of, the rights of their citizens or the welfare of their citizens, very often negotiate with Big Pharma. Believe it or not, the United States doesn't allow the government to negotiate pharmaceutical prices outside of very, very, very specific instances. This is part of why our healthcare costs are so fucking high. Anyway, that's how I would answer this guy's question.
Before you get into that point, did you want
No! No, he had nothing! Oh, even her face, dude. She even knew, fuck. Our side doesn't have a good answer to that. Off the top. I do think there are reasonable ways you can retort that. I think I just gave a very, a 10,000 height view answer to how you can begin to retort that. But the squad here didn't have one. I'm sorry, the communists are not coming across amazingly in my eyes, personally.
Yes, please.
There you go.
I was gonna add, I guess like I lived in China for 8 years and 10 years in the US, so I have like the divide between the two. I guess in China, generally speaking, it's really safe, and there's a lot more equality in certain areas. In terms of like support from the government, it is easier to get healthcare, 100%, and also I think certain societies use communism well, and it can be used well to create, I guess, more equality. I think capitalism ultimately creates inequality.
So one thing I was going to say, you have to be
I mean, maybe there's a level of truth in what she said. That has nothing to do with them talking about the pharmaceutical, like setting prices for pharmaceuticals, you know, outside of markets, which in this case will just be manipulated to try and get as high of a price for these drugs as possible, which is just not a good use of markets, in my opinion.
careful. There's an old saying, we went out of the fire into the frying pan. The question is, under what system do you not get the guys at the top becoming super wealthy? Because Stalin and Mao Zedong, these people become Chavez. Okay, Castro, this man is no angel. The question becomes, which one dampens our greed in a way that benefit the most people?
Yeah, I don't even think it's
Bro. Okay. It's one thing to be, you know, a Gordon Gekko, greed is good type. I think a lot of capitalists, that's what they tend to be. They're just like, this is just, it's good to be greedy. It's good to hoard wealth. Is he trying to be like, capitalism is a system where wealth and power do not accumulate to tiny minorities? If that was true, or if I believed that to be true, I would be a capitalist. But by definition, as a capital owner, you've got all of the power accumulated to you, to a tiny minority, even if you have like a board of directors or whatever the fuck. Compared to the labor force, they're a tiny minority whom the power has been accumulated to. That is a literal function of capitalism. Socialism, by its literal function, spreads that power out to the workers, who would then elect their bosses and managers, in theory. Capitalism doesn't allow for that. At least it doesn't incentivize that. The only thing capitalism incentivizes is all of the power going to the top. By its very structure, by its very nature. I can't fucking believe he is trying to argue otherwise, like with a straight face. That is absolutely mind-blowing. Yes, I agree with Ty Lopez here. We should be trying to get a system where all of the power, all of the wealth will not accumulate to a tiny minority. But in practice, under capitalism, that's what we're seeing. Now again, under a lot of these Marxist-Leninist states, that seems to happen too, in a different way, where all of the power is accumulated to a tiny minority, the Communist Party. Communists would argue to the ends of the earth that that's not really what's happening. I don't know, I'm just giving what I see. Again, opinion, not a conviction. But to say with a straight face that you don't feel capitalism is a system where that will occur, that is fucking mind-blowing. Or the system, even the system where that is most likely to occur, which is what I would argue. That is fucking mind-blowing.
It should be that. It should just be which system is more effective at distributing resources and help.
Yeah, my bro is like, no, I'm the other kind of capitalist. I don't give a fuck about power accumulating to a tiny minority. Who gives a shit? He's probably like, power should accumulate to a tiny minority. He's that other capitalist. He's just like, I just care about resource distribution. Also cap, but it doesn't fucking matter.
Helping people have good outcomes.
And China has abolished poverty, and we have rampant poverty.
China hasn't abolished
Yes,
poverty.
they have, according to the World Bank.
There's 300,000 homeless
But there's
people
more
in
people
China.
though, in ratio.
He said they abolished poverty.
They did.
There's
Google it. The
300,000
World
Well, let's read that.
homeless
But there's
people
more
in
people.
China.
Over the past 40 years, the number of people in China with incomes below US $1.90 per day, the international poverty line as defined by the World Bank to track global extreme poverty, has fallen by close to 800 million. Yeah, I would say that that's a pretty significant accomplishment. Again, capitalists, as they have earlier, would argue that that happened approximately when China began to implement market principles.
People though, in ratio.
He said they abolished poverty.
They did
There's
Google it. The
300,000
World
homeless
Bank wrote a
people.
full article on it.
National
They have
Center of
abolished
Biotechnology
relative poverty.
Information.
Did he just say there's 300,000 homeless people in China? He had to have misspoken, right? In 2023, there were 650,000 homeless people in America. And this number, by the way, if I recall correctly, is what they could physically count on a single night. This is probably a wildly low number for homelessness in America. But again, I straight up don't believe that number for China either. In 2015, it was reported that there were more than 3 million people who were homeless in China. So instead of 300,000, was he trying to say 3 million? But I mean, per capita, that's still far fewer, right? Anyway.
When China was pure communistic, 45 million people starved to death eating bark and dirt and leaves. And it's hard to know, is it doing better, all the things you like? Are you sure that's from the communist side, the Mao Zedong side?
I would argue
or is that from the capitalist side?
I would argue it's definitely the free market side.
Yeah.
I also just want to push back on
Yeah, I would argue that it's definitely from the market side.
one thing real fast.
Are we still going to stick with the China thing? Because
Well, I just wanna
there's
say
so many
it's-
great points
Yeah.
here.
We need a
that, like, we need
prompter over
to
here.
I
make
know.
that more focus. You know
It
what I mean?
it's crazy to me to hear somebody say China's safer though, and like you can literally be disappeared from the streets. Like even your celebrities, famous tennis players,
The
famous
FBI.
people, they are
I don't know. Again, this is one of those places where I'm not going to defend the US and the West and the way we do often infringe on civil liberties, on the things he's describing. It's 100% an issue in the West and in the US. I do believe that. It is. It's a problem. Now, it is not the same at the same scale as in China and what the USSR, if we're talking about communist countries, right? I just don't love this argument that I hear from communists. It's like, oh, you know, well, it's this weird whataboutism, but like, you can be like these people won't criticize the US for doing the same thing. They should, but these guys should also be criticizing China doing it too. It's this weird, like, some will say China doesn't do it at all, these sorts of things. The USSR didn't do these things. Others will say they had to do these things to maintain social cohesion. Once again, I'm still in the centrist position of both are bad. One is worse. I would say that the way these communist countries have historically and currently infringed on civil liberties is a bad thing. There's a lot that I would point to that these communist countries have done that is good, that are currently doing that I generally like. Their stances on civil liberties, I'm fairly opposed to overall. Like, I get some of the arguments, but overall I'm opposed to. And so, I don't know. It's not an apples to apples comparison, what these guys are doing. I don't love this comparison.
Julian Assange.
Yeah, I mean, shout out Julian Assange, but we are not incarcerating Julian Assange right now. We are trying to extradite him here for trial, which I'm opposed to.
We're doing our best.
I'm
And he's been
opposed
sitting
to,
in Belmarsh
and
for
I've
the
spoken
last
out with him. I
month.
actually work with his brother on the campaign to get him freed. But what I'm saying is, we don't have political prisoners in the U.S. We don't. Who are they?
Yeah, I mean, bro's like, what? It's like, no, not nearly to the same extent as you'll see in these communist countries. Like, if I were saying what I say about the U.S. government in China, yeah, I would be silenced and censored and maybe even imprisoned. I don't think that's a good thing. Ultimately, I think it is healthy for good faith dissent over your government. Now, the good faith part, that's difficult, and I get it. But yeah, it is not to say we don't do stuff like that, and we haven't done stuff like that, like McCarthyism, blah, 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 blah. You could go on and on. It's not the same. It's just not the same. Both are bad. One is worse.
Who are they?
Fuck! I'm agreeing with these capitalists. Although, again, I doubt they would really give much, thought to the way the U.S. has done some of this stuff. So they're also in the wrong to an extent.
Noted.
Them. Yeah,
Well,
sure,
okay.
yeah.
Who?
Yeah,
Noted.
sure,
Noted.
yeah.
Who have we assassinated?
Jaleel Montekim
Fred Hampton.
was in jail.
Yeah.
for
We
70
did that.
years.
The
He
government
was a
did that.
Black
I'm fine
Yes.
with this. I detest the FBI. I detest most policing agencies. I've done a ton of work on criminal justice reform.
Ew. Fucking ANCAPs,
That's
dude.
fine. If I was a
Rotten to
capitalist,
the
I would
core.
love the FBI.
No.
I would love the FBI.
not.
Literally.
Bro, I'm picking up the pieces. She's not a normal capitalist. She is an ANCAP. She is extra fucking stupid.
Literally the van.
Not to say I support the way we do policing, but overall, yeah. Clearly getting ANCAP vibes from her.
Guard of capitalism, 100%.
How's that?
It's one of the armed bodies of the state that protects the dictatorship of capital, because ultimately, I mean, 90% plus of elections are decided by the candidate who raises the most money. The FBI is an armed body of the
though.
state.
You recognize that, right?
Capitalists would just be against that.
Well, you can say it's not
You can
real
say-
capitalism,
wait.
but
No, I would
capitalism
say
has
it's
a
not-
tendency to
It's not
accumulate,
capitalism at all. Capitalism is an
concentrate.
economic system,
you can
not
say
a
that.
government.
Right, an economic system that
God, these fucking capitalists are so fucking annoyingly smug. I'm gonna lose my shit.
concentrates wealth and power at the top, that incentivizes capitalists to accumulate capital,
That's not-
monopolize the markets, and this is simply the stage of capitalism that we exist in. When Iran tried to send oil tankers to Venezuela, the U.S. intercepted them with our military, took them back to Texas, and then gave that oil to U.S. corporations. How is that free trade? How is that the free
me throw
market?
one
An
thing out.
embargo are against.
Yeah, again, I don't
is
have to
completely
defend the
against-
U.S. government to defend
I would actually
capitalism.
argue the U.S. government is a huge enemy of
No, you
capitalism.
don't.
We don't, and I want to define my view real fast because I think it matters.
The US government is a huge enemy to capitalism. What a fucking statement, dude. Put that on a t-shirt. Holy shit.
This is more my like political view versus just my economic views. But I would say the only reason you need a government at all are for three things under capitalism, and that is to uphold contracts. You need a court system. You do have to have a policing system so that people cannot harm other people's property or their person, and you need a national defense system. Now, what the U.S. has gone so far beyond that. We should have a defense. It should only be a
Fucking libertarians, dude. Holy shit.
government entity. You shouldn't have private companies coming in and profiting off of it, and it should be on guard to protect us if there's an existential threat, not
Dude. If you say that, you should be legally required to only drink lead-tainted water. Although with her, I think that is a personal choice she is already making.
not waging war against other countries, not getting involved in all this interventionism we've been doing since Vietnam, completely opposed to that. But to sit here and say that that's capitalism, that's the government actually attacking capitalism. That's coming in and perverting our economic system, using our own tax dollars against us to do it.
Communism has caused more suffering than capitalism has.
I mean, if you're talking just sheer numbers, no. Look, the world is under a capitalist hegemony. Most of the world is in terrible conditions. Now, capitalists will argue, well, look at over time, the conditions have gotten better. I would argue that that has happened in spite of capitalism, not because of capitalism. Again, the only incentive capitalism has is to accumulate wealth to the top. There's no incentive to help people. People being helped occurring, or like conditions being elevated by creations of new technology and stuff, is happening in spite of this profit motive, this method of accumulating wealth to the top. So by sheer numbers alone, yeah, capitalism has caused more suffering, clearly, in my view. And again, not to argue in favor of these, communist countries, largely speaking, because I will critique them quite a bit. But yeah, capitalism is clearly the bigger problem by sheer numbers alone.
Join our Middle Ground Patreon to watch this exclusive prompt.
I don't even get to see that prompt? Oh well, you got my answer.
Only the rich benefit from capitalism.
Yeah, it depends on how you want to define this. Is someone earning $35K a year in the United States, rich? Not really. Are they still benefiting from the United States, having a stronghold on, again, this global capitalist hegemony in certain ways? Also, yes. In the broadest of terms, yes, of course. This is what capitalism does. It benefits the rich. Look, fellas, when you accumulate power, whatever that power is, whether it's in the form of money, whether it's in the form of something else, those with that power always have the incentive to try and get more of that power and preserve that power. I do not believe power should be accumulated in this way. The power should be spread out. So in that sense, yes, the rich ultimately mostly benefit from capitalism. Just look at, the world today. We could solve world hunger for a quarter of the United States military budget alone, and we don't do it. So yeah, mostly true. We'll give this a mostly true from, what was that, Politico? We'll give it a mostly true. Obviously, there's nuance in all of these questions. These are dumb Jubilee questions, but we'll go with mostly true.
Really? Nobody.
Wow. Only one?
Only the
Okay.
rich benefit from capitalism. Capitalism being the control of a state apparatus or a nation, government, state, whatever word you use, by a certain class. So if rich people are that class and they control that state apparatus, the government, that nation, of course they're the ones to benefit from it. Talk to the abyss. It seems like a TikTok. Do you guys disagree?
Yeah. You want me to explain why first before you go?
Yeah, hit me,
So
hit
I'm a
me.
Marxist, so I believe that society, through class struggles, transitions through different epochs or different modes of production or different economic systems. So I believe that the Civil War was a revolutionary war in America that transitioned us out of the slave-based mode of production in the antebellum South into capitalism. I believe that capitalism is a superior economic system to slavery. In Europe, I believe capitalism was, in many ways, a superior economic system to feudalism. But I would argue and agree that capitalism is better for everybody than, say, slavery.
Like, you can still rise from the bottom with capitalism, and that's most societies. So it's like it's possible for, the less wealthy to climb to the top if they have a good idea or like innovate on something that they think is a good concept.
We're talking about benefits, right? No, I see both your points. Definition, I know, now I'm being antithetical. I was telling you not to give you a definition, now I'm about to give you a definition of capitalism.
We should establish definitions of things we're talking
Yeah,
about.
we gotta be on the same page about this.
I fucking hate
feel-
this fucking nerd over here. Jesus Christ.
When it comes to science and ideology, it just gets kind of messy. I feel like it's just so much easier to do logical,
I mean,
full points,
if you
but,
cite a definition, I'll accept whatever you give me. I don't know about these guys.
Nah, this is a trap. Hold on, let me finish this. But my idea of capitalism, I very much look at it within, again, very material, very cemented the idea of who has control over the military, judicial, legislative arm of a nation or a state. For an episode about capitalism and communism, we have not talked about class. Whatever class has control within that nation. And now capitalism would be the rich, the bourgeoisie, the job creators, having complete control within that society. Of course that would only benefit rich people. Of course you're gonna push for tax cuts. Of course you're never gonna talk about livable wage, you'll talk about minimum wage, just harm reduction.
It's a tricky one. I'm not sure there's ever a time when wealth doesn't concentrate up, including Stalin, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot. It's all Castro. You don't think Castro was a rich man who was benefited from the Cuban system?
Didn't he have almost $1 billion when he
Yeah,
died?
but I want to interject real fast because unlike Cam,
Again, fine, I'll concede whatever point you want. One, I don't think it's an inevitability. If the public doesn't want it and we establish a structure that prevents it, i.e., a more socialist aligned structure, then that power will not have the ability to accumulate to the top. Again, whether it happened under these communist regimes or whether it happens under capitalism, I don't care. It clearly happens under certain circumstances. Let's eliminate the circumstances where that type of power consolidation can happen. That's all I want, okay?
I won't just accept definitions. So when we talk about capitalism, that's fine, that's your definition. But for most people, when we say capitalism, what we mean is the free exchange and selling and buying of goods, right? And the more you have of that, the more freedom you have in those decisions, the less the government's involved in that, the more capitalism you have. And as we have seen capitalism expand across the world over the past 30, 40, 50 years, we have seen an 80% reduction in world poverty since 1990.
New poverty estimates by the World Bank suggest that the number of extremely poor people who live on less than $2 a day has fallen from 1.9 billion in 1990 to about 736 million in 2015. Now, again, I just would straight up say that happened in spite of capitalism. That happened in spite of a system that incentivizes all of the money to accumulate to a tiny minority. I just don't see how that is an equation that works. Yes, with technology, with more countries becoming industrialized, the poverty rate will fall, and that's a good thing. But these progressions are occurring in spite of the capitalist incentive structure, in my opinion.
90 alone. It was cut in half between 1990 and 2010.
In
That's
spite
miraculous.
of capitalism.
We have also seen a 40% reduction in child labor. We have seen the mortality rate for children.
Pick one, dumbass. Do you want regulations or not? We had to fight tooth and fucking nail to eliminate child labor in the United States. Are you kidding me? You think if we didn't have a law in the United States that prevents child labor, that no company would do child labor? Are you serious? The reason we don't have child labor is because of public regulation, you fucking idiot. And aren't several Republican-controlled states actually repealing child labor laws today? Fucking hell, dude. Jesus Christ.
Cut in half. We've seen the maternal mortality rate fall by like 43%. We work fewer hours. It blows my mind that somebody could say only the...
Okay, again, blood, sweat, and tears. What's the expression? Like, regulations are written in blood or whatever? Yeah, we're working fewer hours, quote unquote. That didn't just pop out of nowhere. The 40-hour work week, the 5-day work week came through civil organizing. The capitalist structure would have you work more hours. The capitalist class fought tooth and nail to prevent those regulations from occurring. This is well fucking documented. I legitimately have no clue what the fuck she's talking about. Are regulations good or not? You have to pick one. Jesus Christ.
The rich benefit from capitalism.
What evidence do you have that that's capitalism?
Because
exactly, dog. It's happening. All of these things that she's talking about are happening in spite of the capitalist profit motive incentive structure.
Not China's poverty alleviation programs or the Belt and Road
Because
Initiative.
we're measuring as capitalism has moved into various countries, and we're looking at their poverty rates and their hunger rates, by the way, get cut. As more and more socialist and communist countries have fallen, which, by the way, we're down to only 5 at this point because most people are turning against it.
God, what a fucking idiot, dude.
Largely since
God, what an idiot. What a gigantic fucking idiot.
More countries implement capitalism, and yes, sometimes it's
That's
mixed,
right, when
like
China
the U.S.
implemented
or the
the Belt and
democratic
Road
socialism.
in their poverty alleviation programs, though. So what
That's when
evidence
they
do you
did
have
what?
that that's not having an effect?
That's when they did what?
Launched their poverty alleviation programs in the Belt and Road Initiative, which are intended to
The Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, is a global infrastructure development strategy adopted by the Chinese government in 2013 to invest in more than 150 countries and international organizations.
build up industrialization in countries who have been prevented from advancing their productive forces by imperialism, economic sanctions, and the U.S.-dominated financial system that emerged after World War II, where the IMF and the World Bank can basically decide whoever they want to give financing to. So like when Chile went socialist under Salvador Allende, Richard Nixon famously said, "Make the economy scream," and the IMF and World Bank went from giving them $200 million in funding a year to $2 million.
Why do communists...
I know a little bit about the stuff he's talking about here, but not enough to really just deep dive into the historicity of all this stuff.
Countries always have to depend on capitalist countries to succeed. Anytime they don't, it's because there was an embargo or they weren't giving them money.
Dude, again, what about the 250 current capitalist countries that are not succeeding? Why don't we ever talk about them?
I don't hear us saying that about North Korea.
The Congo is capitalist. The Congo is one of the poorest countries in the world.
Fucking finally, it took us 33 minutes to get here, but yes, solid point.
Congo, though, is mineral rich. So much cobalt. Every single one of your folds needs cobalt to work. That is your real life vibranium. Capitalism has not helped the Congo. The disorder within the country benefits.
Yeah, capitalism has not helped 98.5% of all countries on Earth. Crazy. Capitalism only helped the 1.5% of countries on Earth at the very top. It's almost like that is the only function of this economic system.
It's the capitalists at home. And
When you say they're capitalist, what do you mean that the Congo is capitalist?
Well, you better...
What? What do you mean? They have a capitalist economic structure. You're trying to tell me that whichever Congo country he's talking about is like socialist? This woman is constantly going like it's capitalism when good things are happening. But when bad things are happening, it's not capitalism ever, under any circumstances. Every single time, without fail. He's like, the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or whatever. Again, I don't know which one he's talking about. There's the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and there's the Republic of the Congo, right? Two separate countries. So I don't know which one we're talking about. Either way, I believe they're both functionally capitalist. But again, when it's convenient for her, she needs to question their capitalist cred. But no, lady, the reality is the vast majority of countries on this planet are capitalist, and they're not doing so hot.
Because your definition is
If
not
you're
mine.
African, you know who the new colonizers are? China. Who's extracting resources out of Africa?
Ty, I love you. Terrible argument with me. Great with
Boy, you
great with
can't
the
just
other.
say
Fuck,
that
I almost
just
did another
because you
spit
say
take.
it's terrible doesn't mean it's
To be
terrible.
clear,
That's just the phrase.
I wouldn't accept your definition
This guy just always tries to like jump in with like a fucking little truth bomb, but it always is a fucking whoopee cushion, dude.
of capitalism, but I will obviously accept your definition of socialism. That's what I meant. Like, obviously, I know what I think capitalism
Wait,
is.
what was
So
that?
my definition of socialism.
Just so I know,
Or
why is
communism,
China?
whatever.
Why do we think? Are you making the stance that supposed altruistic / centrally governed China is not a new capitalistic empire moving into Dubai? You see it there, moving into Africa.
China is not.
I want to hear just a 3-hour podcast of this guy Ty Lopez just talking about shit. I think it would be funnier than every George Carlin comedy special combined times a million, dude.
America.
Holy shit.
There are clear differences
agree
in
with
what
that.
America does in the Congo versus what China does. America comes in, they set up military bases. Unmarked airplanes will come into the Congo with multitudes of American military and multiple corporations. You know what China does? They come in with intellectuals, with a document signing. Would you guys like to do this trade deal? If you do this, we'll build a mining facility that the state can run, and that will benefit your taxes. And you know what the Congo will say? They'll say no. And you know what China will do? They make a new deal. You know what happens when you say no to America?
And how does that capitalism
And the
fall?
law.
So
Again, that has nothing to do with capitalism's
very
fault.
long tirade.
Yeah. So obviously China is investing in a lot of these underdeveloped countries for various reasons. I haven't done a lot of reading on it. I know there is some thought that they are doing it not for the most altruistic reasons, but again, this is another place where there's been a few places here where I don't feel like I know enough about this situation to, give a fully developed opinion on it.
There's no perfect economic model.
There's no perfect economic model. I mean, again, when we reach a Star Trek like fully automated communist utopia where there is zero scarcity, you don't really have an economic model at that point. I think at some point humanity can reach beyond the need for economic models, honestly. So that's the perfect economic model, a post scarcity society. I think we're closer to that than anyone's willing to admit, especially the capital owners. But in terms of like economic models of, capitalist models, socialist models, whatever, yeah, there's probably no perfect one, honestly. There's probably better ones, but perfect one, I hate absolutes. So I'll probably agree with this. There's no perfect one, but there are ones that are significantly better. Like a democratic socialist system sounds significantly better than a unregulated free market system to me, for example. But will I have the hubris to say that my vision of democratic socialism or whatever is perfect? No.
There's no disagreeer there.
Cap, they think anarcho-capitalism is perfect. They're just doing this to sound reasonable. I swear to God. And maybe from the communist side too, from some of the rhetoric I hear from communists on like Reddit and stuff, frankly.
Sorry to start already. One of the main misconceptions about communists is that we want to establish a utopia. And one of the foundational communist texts is Friedrich Engels' Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific, where he criticizes these utopian socialists who are saying overnight we're going to create this perfect society. He says it's not possible. You can only build a better society out of the one you currently have. So we have to take what we currently have as far as a socioeconomic structure and figure out how we can build something better out of that. But it's never going to be utopian. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be corruption that needs to be combated. We just want to build a system that's more rational and based on fulfilling human needs and human flourishing rather than simply profit.
So I think we would agree from capitalism side that there's no perfect system because there are scarcity of resources. And again, I think you are always up against.
I know I just mentioned scarcity. There's scarcity of some resources, I guess, but the basic necessities that human beings could need, like, food, water, housing, healthcare, education, etc., no scarcity there. We could give that to every one of our humans living on Earth, and everyone would be just fine. You could still have a rich class if you wanted, under a system that provides those basic needs. Now, going beyond those basic needs, sure, there's scarcity of all sorts of stuff that I fully believe in, that needs to be addressed. Like, how do you address that scarcity is a question that matters, but not when it comes to those basic necessities. In that sense, we could be a post-scarcity society, but the capital-owning class is inhibiting it intentionally.
It's human nature, which has a lot of corruption, which has a lot of selfishness, a lot of self-interest. Why I like capitalism is that I think it's a system that acknowledges that and says, how do we restrain those impulses within people?
Bro, she's saying that capitalism restrains the greedy impulses in people? That may have been the dumbest thing I have ever heard. Capitalism restrains the greedy impulses in people. That is some level of delusion that I legitimately did not think was physically possible.
Or have people who are poor. We will never have corruption. But I think capitalism does the best job of taking what we're dealing with and trying to make it operate in a system where people are civil to one another and there's natural cooperation within it.
When people say
Oh my fucking God, dude. Holy
perfect
shit.
economic system, it's like saying, what's the perfect science? Communism, Marxist-Leninism is a science. What is the most rational way to organize a society to make sure that it can actually see a future?
And if you read the debates within
I
the
guess
Chinese
so.
Communist Party, they are constantly going, Stalin did this was right, this was wrong. Cuba did this, Tito's Yugoslavia did this was right, this was wrong. They're constantly learning and experimenting.
Stalin wasn't open to too much ideas.
But we're in 2023.
No, but
Stalin's
let's
dead,
talk about the
let's
modern
go.
countries though.
Boom, got him.
Because within the actual communist countries right now, you literally have people going swimming with sharks to escape them. You don't see that happening in capitalist countries, period. One, because
What? She's saying nobody in capitalist countries flee their countries? What? The only people fleeing their countries are people in socialist countries? I think that actually broke my brain. I think it's over. It's like she took a Zamboni and smoothed all of my brain to a perfect crystalline form. She said nobody in capitalist countries flee their countries. Yeah, bro, all of like Central America and Mexico, they're all communist for sure, right? Because they're fleeing their countries. They're not capitalist countries at the bottom of the capitalist rung who've been completely fucked over by United States and just Western foreign policy in general. Okay, I take it back. That, and I seriously mean it this time, was the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I'm going to say this right now. I don't think you can, if you tried, make a dumber statement than that.
you don't have to. We just let people leave when they want to. So that's a big part of it. But two, it's because people know what's better for them, and they are getting out of communist countries in droves when they can. The 2 out of the 5 top.
So she's cool. Is she open borders for people fleeing communist countries, but not open borders for people fleeing current capitalist countries? Damn, dude, how are you making Tai Lopez look smart? What an incredible feat.
Countries that are trying to immigrate here right now are Cuba and Venezuela. People are starving under these systems, and so if you're a pragmatic...
What? Hold on, run it back.
Communist countries in droves when they can. The 2 out of the 5 top countries that are trying to immigrate here right now are Cuba.
Okay, let's see. Where do immigrants come from? Mexico is the top origin country of the U.S. immigrant population. In 2018, roughly 11.2 million immigrants living in the U.S. were from there, accounting for 25% of all U.S. immigrants. The next largest origin groups were those from China, India, the Philippines, and El Salvador. So, like, what is she talking about? She said Cuba and Venezuela? Capitalist. I guess, you know, they claim to be non-capitalist? I don't know. Capitalist, capitalist, capitalist. What is she talking about? Refugees? Is she just making shit up again? Bro, she's just making shit up, and it's unfortunate because Jubilee didn't fact check her. The 670,000 people who saw this are going to hear that and go, wow, 2 out of the top 5 immigrant countries are socialist? Wow, that's a high percentage. I guess that must mean socialism is awful. No. It means that a global capitalist society where power accumulates to the top is going to fuck over everyone else. And that everyone else is going to be fucking desperate to try and get a slice of what your foreign policy has stolen from them. So again, I guess just making shit up. Cool.
Cuba and Venezuela. People are starving under these systems. And so if you're a pragmatic person, you have
What?
to look at communism to track.
People are starving under capitalism, dude! I'm losing my fucking mind! Around 9 million people die of hunger and hunger-related diseases every year. That's about 25,000 human beings every single day. More people than die from AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis combined. Every 10 seconds, a child dies from hunger. 9 million people per year under a global capitalist hegemony. This is not because of socialism. This is not because of communism. This is under global capitalism.
Track record where it has killed millions of people. It is the leading cause of ideological death in the 20th century. And at some point you have to acknowledge that I care about people, I want what's best for them, but this isn't doing it. This isn't working. They all
Bro, even if you take that like bullshit 100 million people died under communism number, fine. It's for the sake of this argument, it's real. Great. That many people have died of capitalism in the last 10 years, 11 years.
also won't let you have a free press in any of these countries. They literally
Yeah, not a good thing. I don't know how much that ties to the 100 quadrillion people who have died under communism, apparently.
have a government-controlled press.
My TikTok's
So
been
if it's
banned
so
7
great-
times after
Mine's
the
been
U.S.
70.
Yeah, so there's no free press
U.S.
here
stuff
either.
does not running TikTok. It's still China.
You're wrong. You're wrong. The U.S. government forced TikTok to hand over American servers to a company in Texas called Oracle, who proceeded to hire a bunch of U.S. State Department operatives and NATO operatives, and that's when we got banned. So
And
it's
that's
not.
why I can't talk
it's
about
no
Google
longer.
on-
Please got him.
on
It's no
TikTok.
longer run by
Please got him.
China.
It's almost gone. It's almost
I'm
gone.
just saying there's no freedom of press in the U.S. either.
Oh, I don't like this shit from communists, dude. We have, and again, don't take this as me saying our civil liberties are perfect, our freedom of press is perfect in the U.S. Of course it's not. It's still, like, despite being imperfect, it's still a million times freer than what you see in these communist countries, frankly. Again, there's a lot I will say that I think that these countries have done. That's good, sure. But freedom and civil liberties, freedom for civil liberties is not one of them, for sure, including freedom of the press.
There is freedom of the press.
What does freedom mean in a country that imprisons?
Yeah, no, there's not. No, we definitely have significantly more freedom of the press. It makes y'all look bad to make the claim that it doesn't. Just gonna be honest. It does not make your cause look good to say that sort of thing.
The most people in the world.
That's a great question. Superimposed.
Yeah, it's kind of another problem than freedom of the press, honestly. Somewhat of a non sequitur from Malombo.
To it. It means that the government is too big. There's too many laws. We make things that are non-violent,
So
that have
the US
nothing
is
to do.
communist.
Listen, if I'm a capitalist, I want to protect people's person and their property. Those are the only laws that
If
should
you're
exist.
a capitalist, you protect the
And if you violate those two
property
things-
and property.
No,
Profit
people's
and property.
personhood and their
Nobody's
property.
protecting
Individual liberty
profit,
is
dude.
essential under capitalism.
What are tax cuts?
You pay everything that you're supposed to, and then they give you money back.
So you have more
So they-
money if there's a tax cut, right? You have more money if
You
you have
have
a
more
tax
of
cut.
your money
I'm
that they
getting
took
lost in
that
the
comes
sauce
back
here.
to you.
Okay, so with those tax cuts that just happened, who has more of their money?
What do you mean, who has more of their money? No,
Who-
I will
what
spell it out
class
for
of-
me.
listen, I got you. Which people gets to keep more of their money? Who?
Well,
Not
I
all of us.
presume it's
not
the
we,
people
it's
making more money, obviously.
who makes the most
If
profit.
there's a tax rate and you make more money, you're obviously going to pay more money, and if you get a tax cut, you're going to get more back because
Are
you
you
made more
referring to
money.
like
that
Trump
possible?
only
Like, that's
giving like
absurd.
tax cuts for the rich or something like that? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, as a socialist, I'm not really here to argue for taxes. I'm more to argue for worker ownership of the means of production. But I think Bunny wanted to go.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. So I guess hypothetically in capitalism, you have free market, correct? So when free market occurs, it goes to near zero profit, correct?
when a free market occurs, it
In a
goes to
free
zero
market,
profit?
the equilibrium point is near zero profit because they'll keep undercutting each other until they maximize demand.
Why would they work or do anything?
Exactly.
I'm talking about classic economics.
Yeah, classic economics. But let's say hypothetically, like Amazon is a prime example. They keep pricing, like I guess, like earning less and less profit. So wouldn't that create monopolies? And I mean, that's how you want to get more demand, right?
But okay, so first of all, like capitalists are going to be generally against like trusts and monopolies, but like at
But
the
it
same time,
creates
like how could
Every time.
no, it does not every time. How
Or oligopolies.
Again, historically, yes, capitalism always leads to monopoly. This is one thing from capitalists, like it's the most copium you could possibly, inhale that I hear from capitalists. The idea that monopolies are just not a natural occurrence from this economic model. It just is. It's not me vibing about it. History has proven that every single time that under this economic system, power will accumulate to a tiny minority. It will create monopolies by its very function. And then the government has to step in and on behalf of the public, break up those monopolies. Otherwise, they would just continue to naturally occur under a capitalist framework.
But isn't Chinese state economy the ultimate
how could a
monopoly?
socialist argue? Yeah, exactly. It's rich to men when socialists or communists argue against monopolies, or they use that as a hitting point against capitalists, when like the biggest and most powerful monopoly that you could possibly have is a state. Is a state-owned monopoly. Yes, it is.
Okay, I see where he's going with this. Let's break it down. So a government controlling, I don't know, something, an industry, a sector, that equals monopoly, or in his eyes is functionally the same as a monopoly. Even if we were to think of them both as monopolies, whether it's a privately owned monopoly or a monopoly in the form of public control, they have fundamentally different incentive structures. This makes them wholly distinct. The privately owned monopoly will still have the incentive to only maximize profits. This comes at the expense of pretty much everything: worker pay, worker benefits, working conditions, and it will always come at the expense of the quality of whatever is in question, with the private monopoly having the incentive to pinch every penny possible to line the pockets of their shareholders. A public-controlled utility or whatever only has one concern: provide the best possible service to its constituents. Let's even view this from a capitalist framework, or maybe more accurately, what would be closer described as a social democratic framework. But the argument for capitalism is that it breeds innovation through competition. But I would argue that there are places where we don't need innovation or competition. One of the cleanest examples for me is healthcare. People just need access to healthcare. Private healthcare, insurance companies, they're just a middleman whose goal it is to manipulate the principles of market systems just to get a cut. They don't actually do anything. You can find countless examples of this. The only thing they're innovating is how much profit they can suck out of you. Again, staying in a capitalist mindset, like Apple versus Google, where in theory they're competing to maximize profits against one another, which gives both of them the incentive to make the best possible product. Leftists, I know that's not how it shakes out in practice. That's just what capitalists think is going on, or at least what should be going on in theory. But again, I agree, it doesn't really shake out that way in practice. From my perspective, capitalism and the profit motive in general, in a lot of ways, actually stifles innovation, but that's another topic. I think we did a video on that before, actually. So yeah, if there's an industry or sector where competition and innovation, even from a capitalist framework, don't really have any applicability, those absolutely should be nationalized and made public. If something will ultimately become a monopoly no matter what, if it's a natural monopoly like we're seeing in telecommunications, for example, just nationalize it. It's going to become a monopoly. You're not going to get any of the alleged incredible benefits of competition breeding innovation if that sector is going to be a monopoly anyway.
Is absolutely a monopoly.
And how are you going to break
Because
up
there's no
monopolies without the
competition.
state? What apparatus is going to come in and break up?
actually
And in a lot of these,
Yeah,
can I make one point
I-
to it? In
I'm
all
okay
these
with
socialist
antitrust
countries
laws.
like Nicaragua, they're now
Okay, so he's okay. So that guy's okay with government regulation. So he's not like a ANCAP or libertarian. At least we get something.
Now investing in small business and trying to
But wasn't he making the argument that, like, whatever.
encourage their civilians to start small businesses and to innovate because they view that as a better alternative than monopoly? And what apparatus do you use to stimulate small business and break up monopolies besides the state? And when the state's doing that, it's not acting as a monopoly.
Ones the government creates.
So what about maybe in the class struggle, you had, like you said, feudalism, slavery, capitalism. We tried communism. Maybe it's the rise of libertarianism.
Let's be clear that slavery is part of capitalism.
No, it's not.
What is?
Slaves were goods.
No.
That
is
slaves
the
had
government.
rights.
So why
that is
does
the government
Hannah.
more than anything intervening in the free exchange of buying and selling?
There are companies,
wait.
right?
Why
There are
does
slave
slavery
companies. They're
predate
just weren't just
capitalism
people
by
hired
thousands
the
of years?
government.
Yeah.
If it's a part of capitalism, why does it?
Oh my God, we did a video on this too. Like, chattel slavery that we saw in, you know, the 19th century, etc., very different from the forms of slavery we saw previously. Not to justify either, but it's not an apples to apples comparison.
Right.
Predate it by thousands of
No,
years.
that's actually a great point. I'd like to hear that
It's
answer.
not a great
Let's
point.
move
It's a
on back
shitty
'cause
point.
It's a hot topic. It's too spicy.
No, it's not
So
too
to hit
spicy.
your
I
point
actually
in
want
terms
to wait.
of
I want to respond because you wanted to
monopolies-
make that point. You cannot
Hannah,
say
Hannah, I don't
that
want to argue.
you do want to argue. You wanted to make your point, so let me make it back.
Hannah,
And then
I don't know. I'm going to be honest. He is not coming across the best, in my opinion, frankly.
you're going to try to say it's too spicy for me. No, I got you. Like, let me respond to you. It is not capitalism coming in and enshrining enslavement. It has been on the books in multiple kinds of countries, multiple economic systems throughout history, and in fact,
Not the same fucking thing that we saw under chattel slavery. I hate this shit, dude.
capitalism is what got rid of it. This
Capitalism is what got rid of slavery? What? I gotta hear this
country
shit.
is what turned the tide on that and started pushing back against the centuries-old.
What? The U.S. turned the tide on slavery? Capitalism ended slavery? I can't believe I'm saying this. She dethroned herself. This is now the actual dumbest thing I've ever heard. I don't even know where to begin, dude. Well, for one, we were among the last, like, major nation to end chattel slavery. And two, it wasn't the free market. The free market wanted to keep slavery. The free market benefits from slavery. Are you fucking kidding me? We had to do a whole constitutional amendment to end slavery. We fought a war to end slavery. The government ended slavery. Public oversight ended slavery, not capitalism. And even that constitutional amendment, we still allow slavery in this country via that constitutional amendment for prisoners. So we haven't even ended slavery.
Awful institutions. So to say it's
England
capitalism,
did,
I think it's
not America.
honestly offensive.
He's like, yeah, dude. She's like, we turned the tide. The U.S. turned the tide on chattel slavery. And when Ty Lopez is the smart one between you two, there is a deep fucking problem.
That's ridiculous.
The purpose of an economy should
The only thing that's ridiculous is the fact that you can somehow get yourself dressed in the morning. Holy
be
shit.
to maximize the well-being of the population.
Personal economy. I'm tired. Broadly speaking, yes. Okay, let's move on.
Hey, that was my problem.
No disagree. What happens if no one disagrees?
I knew we'd agree on
There's
this.
no debate.
When I knew we were going to be debating capitalists, I figured none of you would defend monopoly capitalism. You'd be more pro small business, more pro free enterprise. And, you know, you look at our current American system and it's not like ideal. You know, you're not giving it 2 thumbs up. So, yeah, I just think we all agree that we're trying to find the best economic system to promote flourishing among society and the population.
The economic system has the responsibility of taking care of their systems. That's common sense. Shouts out to Thomas Paine.
I mean, yeah.
Seems pretty.
Kind of self-explanatory at this point. the government should always, or in general, the society should strive to be better and to make lives better for everyone.
But I would say not the government. I think you need smaller. Government seems to mess everything up.
It's never yes or no with you, Ty.
Humans, if you talk about the flourishing, you can still see there's tribes that live more hunter-gatherer. Small. I think smaller's better.
What about a robot? What
Yeah,
about
but no,
an
but
unbiased
families.
What? He's speaking positively over hunter-gatherer society structure? Okay, I don't know, man.
There's an anime called Psychopaths.
Yeah,
Which you
great
guys
show.
don't know?
Hell
Okay,
yeah.
perfect. So I think a centralized brain computer with multiple, like, millions and millions of minds in it might be more efficient. So a bigger government might be more efficient. If we could actually pull it off like Psychopaths, I think it would work.
But who programs
What? That just went off the fucking rails. I don't know what the fuck's going on.
the big computer?
Well, at some point, AI can think for itself.
But the
I don't know
problem
if
is,
that
Oh yeah, I'm in favor of, someday we'll have a super intelligent AI that can solve all of our problems. I'm on board for that for sure.
now,
we
even
happily
right now with
introduced-
AI development, though, because the way it starts to gather its information is by absorbing what's already out there.
On the
So they're
internet.
already having
Yeah, when you're talking about like, a large language model like ChatGPT or whatever, yeah, they learn based on that sort of thing. But, I'm not going to fucking get into an AI conversation. Fuck!
so many issues with AI.
Future super intelligent AGI or SGI is not going to be like these large language models.
Being sexist, being
Yes.
racist, starting to have really toxic views. So I think that it's a nice utopian dream, right? I get your point. But to me, I would never trust anybody or any piece of machinery to come in
But that
and
would be the same
run
with
our
people.
lives.
That's
And our
realistic,
goal
right?
is to get worker
I would. A super intelligent AI, I would.
ownership of the means of production and worker control of production. So I actually agree with what you're saying. And one of my buddies, Christopher Halali, is a communist farmer in Virginia, and he lives in a very similar community to you. And he says the same thing. Workers should be able to make these decisions about when to harvest, but they can't do that if all the farmland and all the farming tools and tractors and fertilizers owned by multinational corporations and big agribusiness.
I would like to note that you said control rather than own. And I think that under a capitalist system, workers do control the means of production by using their money as indicators. And,
Under a capitalist system, the workers do control the means of production. I gotta take it back. I gotta do it again. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Under a capitalist system, the workers control the means of production, not the capital owner. I don't even know what to say.
the business owners produce things based on the demand that consumers or workers, or the same thing, have.
Our dollar doesn't mean fucking shit.
Our dollar does mean something. It's an indicator for what things are valued at.
But if a central decided, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if the central
They'll do the
government
most
just
efficient,
decides
right?
what it's worth,
No,
like they have
create
no
shortages and
indicator.
surpluses, because price is just a signal of scarcity. It
Wouldn't they
signals,
long-term?
hey, there's
Like,
not
they
as
would
many
think
things as
long-term.
this, so the price is going to go up. Or hey, we've got a surplus of this, so the price is going to come down. It's a signal to people, and it signals scarcity. If you remove that signal, that's why centralized economies fail, because there's no way of
economic
allocating
calculation.
resources. There's no economic calculation. And then you have the situation where people have to go into the black market to get things that they need. It creates utter chaos versus under.
What? First off, yeah, I somewhat agree with some of these things they're saying. I am, again, not entirely against markets for certain use cases. But does she just say black markets are chaos? From her perspective, what is a black market? An unregulated market, right? They're markets free of regulation and oversight. Isn't that exactly what she's arguing for? She is just a walking contradiction, constantly making shit up, wrong about almost everything, which even among conservatives on Jubilee, even among capitalists in general or whatever, is a pretty significant accomplishment.
Capitalism, you have this free flow of goods based on the signals that are going out between merchants and purchasers. It's all very seamless.
I would say that any capitalist would agree that the ability to just quit your job and suffer through the demeaning act of trying to find another one is not a great example of freedom within this country.
Why? I don't understand. It's very easy to quit your job and get another job. Like, it's not difficult.
Why is it demeaning?
Sure. The average person.
What? It's very easy to quit your job. Dude. Are you fucking kidding me, dude? You can just tell when someone is fucking born out of immense privilege.
Person who decides to quit a menial job, who has no access to education to get them a higher paying job, who has no social connection, no cultural connection, no state apparatus helping them. In real life, just pure real life, it's not as easy as turn off, turn on.
This leads to another really great example of government intervention that really screws up. You brought up education. Pretty much anyone in the United States can get into college, no matter how terrible your grades were.
Jesus Christ, dude. This is some of the most, like I said, privileged shit I've ever heard. You know, none of these dumb motherfuckers have ever had to spend weeks or months on LinkedIn, Indeed, building a resume, sitting through interviews, first round, second round, third round, over and over, just to get a job that gives you a crumb more money and personal freedom over a job that's, yeah, maybe easier to get at like a grocery store or a McDonald's, but they will not pay you a living wage. And they will often force you to work part-time to prevent you from getting any real benefits, resulting in you having to work 2 or 3 part-time jobs just to get barely a living wage and getting no benefits from any of them. That's the reality for most people living under capitalism. Hassan says this, dude. Just slide on Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever, just slide the income calculator to 100K and just apply to those jobs. You're in. Easy as that. That is literally what she just said. When people talk about privilege, this is what it is, dude. And again, that's if you have the privilege of being in the position to, say, get a college degree that many of these jobs require to even get your foot in the fucking door. I have been there, man. I cannot tell you how fucking lucky I got from the very beginning. The amount of things that had to go right for me to be where I am today. I don't want people to have to go through all of that just to barely get a livable wage.
That's great. That really leads me to my next point.
It's cheaper in...
God, what do you say?
That really screws up. You brought up education. Pretty much anyone in the United States can get into college, no matter how terrible your grades were. That's great. That really leads me to my next point.
It's cheaper in...
It is very expensive, but do you know why people are able to go to college despite the fact that it's super expensive? Because the federal government comes in and says, hey, I've got 2 bags of money right here, and I'm willing to give it all to you.
Dude. That's just more self-reports for this guy's crazy amount of privilege that he is clearly completely unaware of. Bro is trying to say there are no systemic barriers blocking certain people's access to college in the United States. And I don't know. I don't know if I care what your grades were before you decided to go to college. You should be able to go to college, and if you can pass the curriculum, you should be able to get your degree. I don't know, right? As long as you got your high school diploma or your GED or whatever, you should be able to go to some sort of college and try and get a college education. And as long as you pass those classes, what the fuck's the problem?
Even though I know you can't pay it back. And then the colleges say, well, hey guys, it seems when we keep raising our prices, the government just keeps paying it. Yep. And we don't even have to worry about if the kids are able to pay it back. We're just gonna keep on paying it. The trend line for like college tuition.
So letting colleges privately control their own prices for the sake of profit generation is now a bad thing? Yeah. Sure, I agree with this dolt. Let's eliminate the profit motive from our education system. It doesn't need to be there. Let's make college free. Or fuck it, let's pay people to go to college, like a lot of those social democracies that we talked about earlier do. It would be ROI positive for our society in the long run. Capitalism has too many middlemen who are only there to serve as a toll booth. But unlike a real toll booth, where the funds are used directly for funding a public good, the toll just goes back into the pockets of executives who hoard it away for doing next to no work. That's how many sectors under capitalism fundamentally operate. Anyway.
Prices and like government involvement in the education system, especially on the collegiate level, is like identical.
What does government do well? We forgot to ask
Prop
that.
up capital and prop up
Kill
big
communists.
banks.
But then you don't like government. Then we all agree we don't like government.
Man, that was frustrating. I didn't really love a lot of the arguments the communist side made and the capitalist side were... I expect them to be really awful, and yet they always manage to surprise me by how awful they end up being.